the way I explain inflation in my book is by looking backwards, looking at the history. Mm-hmm. Because I go all the way back to the Viking Age, and my region, Trøndelag, in the middle part of Norway, as I told you, and it's got a rich history. And if we go back to before 1050 after Christ, then we had what we call monetary freedom, or what I call monetary freedom, at least. So people could use whichever money they liked best. They could use silver coins from the UK. They could use gold coins from the Arab countries. And they preferred to use coins with the highest possible amount of valuable metals, namely silver and gold. And this was kind of special because most other places you already had introduced inflation as a policy, where the kings took control of the coinage and they debased the coins over time, and just defrauded their people. So what I tried to explain was the transition from this kind of free society and to a society which was plagued by inflation in a short period of, it took just 16 years before tragedy occurred. So it was introduced in 1050, and in 1066, it became a catastrophe. Because
what happened?
What happened was that the king, his name is Harald Hardråde, he introduced inflation in Norway in 1050 after killing one of the sort of local big guys in big shots in Trøndelag. And I think it was he reduced the silver content from 90% to 33% within 16 years. And basically what he did then was probably that he tripled almost the money supply in 16 years. And he enriched himself a lot by doing that, probably raised taxes as well at the same time. And he decided that he wanted to go to England and conquer England. So he took 7,000 to 9,000 men with him.
79?
7,000 to 9,000 people with him to England. And they were surprised by King Harold of England and slaughtered in the Battle of Stamford Bridge. And that was actually the end of the Viking Age. That marked the end of it all.
Huh.
So it's so dramatic, our story of going from monetary freedom to inflation to catastrophe, the end of the Viking Age, and a very swift transition in respect of culture and politics, etc. And this is what I think resonates with people. They can feel what inflation is when they read my book and hear about this story.
I think a lot of people are feeling it now, but I don't think they truly understand what's happening. I've spoken to a lot of people about it. Some do. Yeah, some understand. Some are believing what they've been told, that, you're experiencing high inflation because Putin attacking Ukraine, which obviously is an excuse. But people are experiencing it at the moment. People are seeing prices go up, and not enough people fully understand why it's happening, how wasteful the government is. We had a guy on here called Dan Tubb recently. He's been on a couple of times. And we've talked about the government receipts of 1 trillion a year. We've talked about their expenditure being 1.1 trillion. So they're increasing the debt by 100 million a year. We've talked about the increase in the money supply that's come with that. And we've talked about the massive inflation we've had. Like, we've talked it through, but getting this message across to like a larger, wider group of people is still proves really difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult for them to see the big picture. And that's the key phrase in my book. It's in one of the opening pages. Let's look at the big picture. Because there are so many numbers and people, they don't relate to the word trillion. They don't understand what a billion is almost, you know. So you have to explain it to them using stories. And my method is to make use of stories with real people, both in terms of villains and heroes, and also talking a little bit about what kind of personalities the economists were, in order to make them real people, you know, not just someone from academia or some obscure economist. So when you give the story flesh and bones, it's possible for people to understand and to relate to this. So what I did was I started with the Viking Age and showed them how the transition was. And then I followed it all the way up to our day and age and explained how the monetary policy affects our daily lives using happenings that people knew of in our age, that they could relate to, you know, the collapse of the economy in the 80s and early 90s, for instance, and also the great financial crisis. So by beginning with the very beginning and ending up where we are today in the simplest possible manner using real people and real stories, then it becomes possible for them to understand. And very many readers appreciate that, they tell me.
How much did you cover the rise of central banks and their role?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I hear some people, they say that it started in the UK with the Bank of England. But the first central bank was the Swedish bank. It was called Riksens Ständers Bank. And it started operating in 1668. So I write a little bit about the bank that was before this central bank, the Swedish bank, which was before. And then I write about how it facilitated all the wars that the Swedish king was involved with afterwards in the beginning of the 1800s. So it's a very interesting story, of course. And what happened was that this innovation in monetary policy, it spread throughout Europe like a wildfire. You know, and I think the reason why it did so was because they saw what a little Swedish country with a mad warring king, what he could do in terms of waging wars against a giant like Russia and many other countries. And he made very effective use of the central bank. So it spread to all the other countries, and the kings wanted to have this, you know, and it was kind of a weapon.
And how did the central banks evolve? What was the original purpose of this Swedish central bank?
I think the original purpose was it was the Swedish nobility who started up this bank, because they watched how the previous bank performed in terms of redistributing wealth by using paper bills and inflation with paper money, you know. But the Swedish king was quick to just take control over the bank, and because he wanted to have the revenues for himself and to borrow money, wage wars. And it's quite simple, actually. Yeah, it was a tool.